Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Better Body Radio. Now, for those that have been listening to the show since its early days, you'll probably recognize quite a difference. Can you hear what it is? We have a new podcast mic, so hopefully the sound quality of this podcast coming out to you for episode number 35 is going to be on point. So, yeah, very excited to have this on board now. You'll be able to hear more of the rasp of my Scottish accent. But the main thing is that as we interview more guests and as we even publish our own podcast now moving forward, there won't be any issues with sound quality. And it was one piece that we'd asked recently our listeners for feedback on the podcast, and that was one of the most resounding things that came back again and again was the sound quality. Because sometimes I'd record it on one computer without headphones, and sometimes I'd record it on a different computer with headphones. So it was very mixed, but now I've got the nice Rode NT USB mic, and we are flying. We're cooking with gas. So anyway, without further ado, what is today's episode? Well, today's episode we are talking about program hopping. So we're going to give you a bit of an idea of what is it, what does program hopping exactly mean, why do people do it, what are maybe some examples of program hopping, even maybe some personal examples I've had actually very, very, very recently, but also in the past, and then what should you really be doing to avoid program hopping, and what's the alternative to that? So let's dive in. What is it? Well, program hopping just essentially refers to going from one program to another to another to another, and not giving an individual program in of itself its own right, not either seeing it through to its design conclusion, or essentially just dropping off and doing something completely different every time you go into the gym, or doing something different like really frequently. Why do people do it? Well, I guess the big thing is that people do it out of boredom. People like nowadays, they don't want to be almost intellectually involved in what they're doing. Sometimes the gym is a big distraction. It's a way of numbing themselves from the outside world. Some people are super dissatisfied in their work life. Some people are in relationships that don't fulfill them. Other people are just unhappy in many ways, and that's not necessarily a judgmental statement I make. It's just that people are always looking for ways to kind of distract themselves and to get that instant hit of dopamine, that feel good sensation. And exercise is incredibly powerful for that. It's a very powerful dopamine inducing activity. It can make you feel incredibly good, and it can, like anything else, it can become fairly addictive to do. You can almost get addicted to that feeling of fatigue, that feeling of those endorphin rush and everything else. So people often do it out of boredom. They just oh, well, I kind of did this plan, and no, I'm just a bit bored of that exercise now. I'm just going to move on to this. Oh, I've heard that German volume training is really cool. Let me just go try that out. Or I've heard that 21 method is really cool, and it's literally looking like something completely different from week to week to week to week. One myth to bust down right now would be this whole idea: I want to just shock the body. This is not how it works. You're not going to just shock the body by doing all sorts of random different stuff and shock it into muscle growth or shock your body into fat loss. It just really doesn't work like that. So that's one reason people do it out of boredom. And part of why people do it out of boredom as well, though, or this is a bit of a side note, some people, once an exercise, they actually, they've kind of acquired the skill. And we always say to our clients, it probably takes around about 4 weeks whenever you implement a new exercise. And of course, for maybe more advanced trainees, they can get the hang of a new exercise in their rotation, especially if they've done it in the past, and especially if they've been training for a long time. They can probably get the hang of an exercise within a couple of weeks, and they can kind of establish a baseline, right? What's a good, for example, loading weight for this particular type of setup for this program. But for a lot of beginners, or even early intermediates, it's often the case that it's going to take them around about 4 weeks, anywhere between 2 and 4 weeks, sometimes even longer, depending on the client, to really nail down the skill of that particular movement and how to do it right. And it's only then are they actually going to be able to start loading and really progressing and kind of try to beat the logbook, so to speak, on a week-to-week basis, whether it's by improving execution, whether it's increased reps, whether it's more load, whether it's more controlled tempo, or be able to direct effort in a more concentrated way, which I guess would be executing what I said already. And that's kind of what we'd be looking for. But then what often then happens is people literally follow a program for 4 weeks, I'm bored, that's why I do something else now. And so the reason why that their progress really stalls, stagnates, or actually just never really moves forward is just because they're kind of in a constant skill acquisition phase all the time, because they're never given an exercise long enough to actually start to reap the rewards and benefits of laying down that skill and then being able to load it and create a stimulus from it. So for those of you that get really bored of a program, so I'm just bored and I'll do something else, I would urge you to reconsider that thought process and to at least give exercises the time they deserve. If say you're someone, what's an easy way to kind of make a step towards that? Well, if you're someone who kind of hops programs every 3-4 weeks at the moment, give it double that length of time, and you'll be astonished if you just stay really true to it. You logbook it, you log exactly what you're lifting, and you make sure that you progress that in some way across a 6-week period if you're, say, you're doing 3, or even an 8-week period if you're someone who changes every 4 weeks. You'll be very pleasantly surprised with the outcome that you're going to get. Now, let's move on. What's maybe another reason that people do it? Well, I think this goes without saying. We live in a world now where we have instant access to that, like social media. We have instant access to all the information we can ever want and all the distractions we can ever want. So social media for the fitness industry has been a bit of a double-edged sword. It's been a fantastic thing, for a lot of fitness professionals to be able to share their knowledge and expertise with a wider audience than they would once have been able to do. In the past, it would always been a case of a trainer was really well known in their home place or hometown, and it was all about word of mouth, and that was kind of how things were. And then the internet came around, people were able to email market and all that sort of stuff. And then, of course, the new media came around, and this is where Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, all of these different social media platforms have been hugely prevalent and kind of almost allowing these fitness professionals to really make a decent living out of producing content and putting out content for people to consume. The problem is that often a lot of people look up to these, Instagram, and just nowadays we of course have influencers, and then we have actual trainers who actually coach people in a proper way, and it's not just about ass and ab shots or just like look at use my discount code and affiliates and all that sort of stuff. And even with some fitness professionals, they often put out some information that's maybe a bit biased, or it's maybe not, it's without context. And so you can see that this becomes a bit of a clusterfuck, to be honest, of just all this kind of mixture of not just amount of information, but completely different quality, opinions. And so people will often look to like their favorite inspo on Instagram, and they'll just be like, right, well, that person looks like that, and they do these, for example, say for the ladies out there, I see this fitness model and they do tons of mini band, booty band workouts, so that must be good for hypertrophy. But the reality is, if I had to break down for you why I have literally not used a mini band with a client in about 1.5 years, and I got you to understand the biomechanical reasons and the reasons why that's actually not adding to the stimulus, is actually detracting from the majority of individuals achieving any form of progressive stimulus, especially when you add something like a mini band to an exercise like a glute bridge, how it actually really detracts from the effectiveness of that exercise. Despite increasing sensation, it doesn't actually increase the stimulus. So that's just an example. People often see, look at these cool exercises. I want to try that in my next session. And because people are constantly bombarded with new ideas, it almost makes it, seem more, it's more tempting to kind of not stick to a plan, because if I stick to a plan over a period of time, then I'm not going to be able to try out all these cool moves that I see on the gram. So that's another reason why people do it. And then there's, that they don't have a structured plan. Many people just don't have a structured plan. And so, of course, every time they go into the gym, it's just, what's available? Looking around. You can imagine, picture me now, my eyes looking around the gym, scanning the gym when I first walked through the door. Oh, well, the leg press is free. I'll just go and do that, and people literally will just pick whatever's free, or they kind of go in like, well, I think I'm just going to come in and I feel like doing this today. And that's what the majority of people do when they go into the gym. Very few people are actually following a really structured training plan with progression, with logic, with thought. And so as a result of that, they're just, it's almost like a different type of program hopping. It's like they're not even following a plan. They're just literally doing exercise hopping. You can almost call it as a subdivision of program hopping is exercise hopping. So there you go. So that's one thing. Many people just don't have a structured plan. And then this is one that we will sometimes see as coaches. Now, granted, we're getting a lot less of these types of clients. And this is probably something that maybe more of the trainers who are either a bit new to the industry, or just a little bit inexperienced. They're maybe not good at being really firm or challenging clients, or maybe they're just not setting up a very effective journey as to how the client should be progressing as far as their training, nutrition, having those frameworks and systems in place. But it also could be these bottom feeding trainers who just don't care. They're on their phone the whole hour. They've kind of got a loose idea of the plan in their heads. And then, they're just kind of like, okay, we'll crack on with this. So that's what, they might not be sticking to the plan because there might not be a plan in place. But say, in the rare circumstance where someone does hire like a really good quality trainer, and listen, I think any coach that tells you that they have a 100% success rate with their clients is an absolute liar, because none of us do. We all have people that we just simply can't help because they're not ready to be helped. And there will be the odd occasion, and this happens, of course, less as you get more experience. But if I look back to my first half of my career, my first 5 years of being in the industry, I look back and think, man, I really lost that person because I didn't have the knowledge to, to do this, or I didn't have the emotional intelligence to get to them in the way that needs to be reached. But there will be situations where even really good experienced coaches, 10 plus years experience, they will sometimes, it seems all good, like really good when they start working with someone, but then things just either go south or what it usually tends to happen is that the client will maybe not fully understand, despite expectations being really, really clearly set. Like, listen, this is a long-term journey. It's going to take you anywhere between 6 to 9 months realistically to get a really, really good turnaround set of results here, just based on your start point. Now, don't get me wrong, there are some people that can come into a coaching process and they can knock it out of the park in a really short, time frame, like 12 to 16 weeks or whatever. But for the grand majority, they're going to need to invest a lot more time and effort to get them into a position where they're able to train effectively, they're getting good baseline habits in place, things like sleep and stress management, all the, ticking all the boxes, as we like to say, handling and managing all your big rocks. And really, realistically, they need to kind of be doing that. And then, they'll get results, but there'll be the odd client that'll come in and they think because they paid the money, they will, just follow the plan and, I'll just kind of see how it goes after 12 weeks. And maybe they just haven't been fully honest with nutrition. They maybe haven't been tracking accurately, but they've not been communicating that with their coach. They've been sneaking in one or too many little treats or foods and then trying to say, I just don't understand why this is not working. And we know when people are lying, and this is maybe another podcast in of itself, like we know when people are not sticking to the plan because, there's certain parameters and data that we put in place to ensure that we know someone's been accurate or not. So yeah, where was I going with that? Yes, so the point thing was saying, so often what many clients will do is they'll get 12 weeks down the line, they haven't really done their part honestly, they've not been honest with themselves, and so they'll point the finger at the coach and they'll say, well, I'm just not going to do it anymore because it's just not working, and the thing is, this is a really, really interesting particular point, this, because sometimes actually it is working, sometimes they're actually getting really, really significant changes. It might just be like, for example, say the scale hasn't shifted yet, but they've had incredible recomposition. They've had, huge improvements in like their digestive health, their energy across the day is better, they're managing blood sugar better, their blood pressure is down. They can have all these other things going on, but they've hung themselves up on the scale is the reason. They're seeing that scale going down as my only measure of success. That's at least what they end up getting in their head. They just can't get away from that. They become fixated by that. They're almost neurotic about the number on the scale. And so they kind of just point finger and say, well, this is not working. I'm just going to go do something different. And that can often happen as well. I actually had a situation recently, and I won't go into too much detail, but, I was working with a client doing really, really well. And they, just at the 12-week mark, kind of started ghosting and, communication dropped off. And when I eventually managed to get a hold of the individual, they kind of just said, oh, I'm just going to put a pause in it now. And, within our business, anyone who's worked with us, our current clients will know, it's really not how we do things. Like we're very clear with expectations from the start. This is not something that you just kind of dip in and out of. You don't just hop from one thing to another. You commit to a coaching relationship for a long period of time. And we explain to most of our clientele that it's at least a 6 to 9 month, journey together as a minimum, really, to get to where most people need to get to. But we obviously ask at the beginning at least for 3 months, but realistically, people are going to have to spend at least 6 months to a year with us. And so this particular individual got 12 weeks in, realized that work was getting super stressful, was ready to travel soon, and just decided, I'm just going to pause and I'm just going to go from doing a really well structured, really well balanced program that was producing really good muscular returns. Like, really composition wise in terms of muscle mass changed significantly. I finally learned how to apply tension properly, how to do proper tempo, how to execute certain muscle groups better. And then just went off and just started doing like a random 10 by 10 like setup. Just no communication, just started doing 10 by 10. And it's astonishing. And the worst part is that those type of individuals will really wonder, like, well, why am I not making progress in my physique? Well, it's just you can't stay the course, or when things get tough, you can't lean into your coach and communicate with them. Listen, I'm really struggling with work. How can we adjust the plan to make sure that it fits where my lifestyle is kind of shifted to in these last few weeks? And that's also a different podcast for another time as well, communication with your coach. But the point is that too often people are quick to point the fingers without taking full accountability and ownership for what they could have done better. And ideally, as good coaches, we will try and communicate. And if clients are vulnerable enough to be open and admit their mistakes, then we'll, there's never judgment. It's just a case of, right, let's identify these. How are we going to get around these obstacles? Okay, and then let's charge forward. But when there's no communication and people get really upset, like that's the difficult thing as a coach. Like, and for anyone that's listening who's thinking about hiring a coach, whether you're thinking about working with us or whether you're thinking about working with someone in your local area or whatever it is you're planning to do, just understand that we can only do so much as a coach in terms of providing you that roadmap, that accountability, that framework, that real structured programming, good quality evidence-based nutrition advice. But then if you don't communicate with us and you don't lean into your coach at the times where you need it the most, which is actually when things aren't going well, then you just simply cannot expect it, to get the results that you're after. So that's just something to bear in mind. And then the last point I would say why people program hop is instant gratification. Like people just want, just to go in, they just want an instant hit of reward and, feel like they're absolutely, crushing something. They want to feel like they've just, oh, well, I've worked hard. I deserve to go now and have X. They have almost a bit of I like to call it the doggy treat mentality where, well, if I burn X number of calories, I can then go and have this. And they, almost like justify choices outside of the gym by the very virtue that they go to the gym. And so because they're getting that instant gratification of, right, well, I worked hard or I got sweat on or I feel sore, whatever it is. So what are some examples of kind of program hopping? Well, people might, for example, and we see this a lot, there's the two main ones we see in the industry is it's one, people maybe download a plan online and maybe say it's maybe mapped out as like a 12-week program. It's got like 3-4 week mesocycles in it. And they maybe get through 3-4 weeks of this plan and just go, bored, I want to do something different. And they move on to another online plan. And so people do a lot of like online plan hopping or, program hopping in terms of they download the one PDF from one site and then they go and follow a workout off T Nation and then they go do bodybuild.com. And that's one example of program hopping. The other is that people hopping between modalities. So they'll often, maybe do something like, okay, well, I'm going to go into the gym and follow a training plan. And then, and because, building muscle and changing your physique is a hard process and it takes time, often they'll kind of just like, the resistance training just doesn't make me feel sweaty enough. Now, why do you think that is? If you've never done resistance training, you have no strength, then you have to build up your capacity to be able to deliver a high amount of output from your reps, from your exercises. But if you're weak, you've not ever built any sort of form of strength through resistance training, of course, it's not going to feel as challenging as when you go into a class and your heart rate is ready to burn, it's freaking beating so hard that you feel like your heart's going to burst out your chest. Of course, it's not going to feel as challenging as that, but it's a different stimulus. It's a different purpose to that. And so it's just for people to just be patient enough to go through that process of understanding what it is to train hard, what it is to train accurately, and to really get the most out of a resistance training plan. So that's huge. And that's another one we see is people going between classes, gym, classes, gym, classes, gym. Now, what should you be doing is the next question. So I think the big thing that we really promote within our business, but you can see that any good coach that we are aware of, that we know, that maybe is running their own business, whether they're in the UAE here or they're in the UK, US, any other part of the world, is they ultimately take their client on a journey. They really set up a very clear vision, a roadmap almost you could say, of, right, what are we expecting to get from this process? Well, based on taking on all your data and all your information and from where your starting point is now, then we're going to start out by, doing this as far as the nutrition side of things goes. We're going to maybe just like see you move through a couple of sessions, get a bit of an idea of where your current capacity is, what your movement quality looks like, how able are you to work hard in a set, are you someone who gets fatigued really quickly, have you got a good cardiovascular base, have you not? All of these things are all stuff that need to be taken into consideration. So after a coach has kind of done all the onboarding and all of that initial stuff, they're then going to map out a journey. And it might be that once they've mapped out the journey, like, listen, you need to have at least 4 to 8 weeks of just doing a preparation phase where we lay down some of those baseline habits. We just make sure you can turn up to the gym consistently X number of times a week. We're making sure that we're just getting, 3 solid meals and a snack, which might be a protein shake, for example, across the day, just to make sure that you get used to a structure of eating, good quality meals and kind of somewhat evenly spaced throughout the day, just to make sure that you've got all that energy that you need as well. To obviously get the most out of your training and recover for your training. Obviously, if you're in a fat loss phase goal, then, eventually at some point we want to be tracking calories and macros so that you're able to really refine and dial in, your energy balance for fat loss. So ideally taking someone on a journey is kind of laying out that full roadmap from, preparation phase, potentially into a fat loss phase, potentially into reverse dieting, into building muscle, maintenance phases. That'll ideally, map out that whole journey. So it's, when you're looking to invest in a coach, rather than program hopping between random programs online that have not been designed specifically for you as an individual, take the time for the coach to learn who you are, to trust that coach that has your best interests at heart, that they're taking a health first approach with you, and that they're able to assess you and give you exactly what you need for you as an individual. This is then going to save you a lot of time, effort, and money further down the line when you actually get the results quicker because you're doing something that's been made specifically for you. Another thing as well is just, if we look at program hopping specifically outside of just like actually hiring a coach and trusting the process, if you are someone who's in the gym and maybe you've created your own plan, or you're working with a coach online and you're just in the gym following that coach's plan, the big thing I would always suggest to a lot of my clients is, you want to continue to progress on movements for as long as you possibly can. So, people often say like, oh, well, that's the 8-week mark, when are we getting a new plan, or when's this exercise coming out? And the thing is, as long as you're progressing in some manner or another, we use a lot of double progression work with our clients where we maybe set like a bit of a wider rep range within sets. So we might say, right, you've got 2 working sets, top sets of say 8 to 12, and you've got a back off set of 12 to 15. That's just a very random example from a program I did recently for a client. It doesn't have to be potentially even as complex as that. It could be a lot simpler. But then we would say, right, the reason why we've got those rep ranges is that you're going to use a load that you can manage to hit the bottom end of that rep range. And the goal is going to be to progress in reps. Once you can hit the top end of the rep range, you can then increase weight. And so it's this idea of progressing reps, then load, reps, then load, reps, and load. And that way, people are going to continue to see really tangible changes, but they're not trying to take leaps and jumps beyond what they're capable of doing right now. So that'd be a big thing. And it's making sure then if that, and I'll just give an example from, my first training plan that I did with my coach, Callum Rystrick, and the Muscle Mentors was, I think we followed the same plan for, 28 weeks or something like that. And some of those exercises we will continue to progress on in some fashion or another. Now, probably rather than almost like changing the entire program once things were starting to stall a little bit. So yeah, we end up taking, once you've kind of taken 3 bites of the cherry, so to speak, on a particular exercise, that'd be time to rotate the exercise out. Now, rather than kind of wholesale changing the program once we've reached that stage, and what we end up doing if we do that is that we just end up almost changing our entire plan when, maybe like 60, 70, even 80% of the movements are still progressing, but we change the program because we're no longer making progress on a few exercises. So rather than changing the entirety of a program structure, when we kind of get to a point where we're maybe not able to, it's just not realistic that we're going to be able to progress on that particular exercise, then rather an exercise would get rotated out, but the programming structure would stay the same. And that's very much what happened within my plan with Cal. Like, the bigger movements, they kept progressing for quite a long period of time, almost the entirety of that phase. But maybe some of the smaller muscle groups like, side delts, biceps, triceps, certain maybe other movements, maybe like, hip extensions or RDLs, they maybe got to a point where it was like, right, we can't really drive any more progression here, so let's change the variation, but not necessarily change the program. So ideally, we stick with the program for as long as that we're able to really maximize the adaptations from the stimulus we're inducing. Once we're getting to a point we just can't, really create any further adaptation from that plan, or it's evident that we're starting to hit a bit of a wall, then we can start to reassess, where do we go from here? I think the big thing to also bear in mind is that training has got to be used as an adaptation inducer and not just a calorie burning tool. And so when we go in the gym, I think often one of the reasons why people will program hop is that they want to do something that's even more challenging, makes them sweat more, the heart rate's through the roof. You just want things to feel as intense as possible, or as hard as possible. And that's not really the goal of training. Yes, the goal of training is to train hard, to create an adaptation, to force an adaptation from the body, but it has to be done in a calculated manner. And, often a lot of people will associate, well, if I just work super, super hard, then I've earned X. And again, like we talked about earlier, the treat mentality. So we don't want to get down that trap. So what is a great way to think about it is think of training as the way that you're going to shape your physique. You're going to use that to create the shape that you want and the aesthetics that you're looking for. And then we can use tools like nutrition and cardiovascular work in order to add additional energy expenditure or to reduce energy intake. And that's a much better way to look at it. We can use things like NEAT, for example, non-exercise activities, such as going out for a walk, as a way of getting activity outside the gym to increase that energy expenditure as well. So remember, we want to use training as an adaptation inducer, but not as a calorie burning tool. We have plenty of other things we can use to manage energy balance effectively. And I suppose the last point, guys, is just going to be shameless plug here. Hire a coach who can design an individualized plan for you. Like if you've never had a structured plan set up, you've never had a plan that essentially looks at your lifestyle, what you're able to recover from, understands your nutrition preferences, and ideally is matching the nutrition intake to the demands of the training that you're doing, to ensure that you're actually going to be able to stick to the nutrition plan, that you're actually going to be able to adhere to it, and that nutrition actually helps you progress with your training. Even if you're in a fat loss phase, you can still progress with your training if the nutrition is set up, intelligently enough. So this is definitely something that, as far as the Better Body Collective is concerned, we do a very direct, kind of individualized approach. We don't do group coaching. Maybe we'll offer some form of group coaching or group challenge down the line. But as it stands at the moment, if you're based here in Dubai, we offer one-to-one in-person, very high-end coaching. What we don't offer is personal training. It's not a case of that you turn up, you train with rent a friend 3 times a week. They make you feel warm and fuzzy inside and then send you off on your way. It's not about that at all. We really put an emphasis and an effort into the client journey, really maximizing your other 23 hours outside of the gym, but also making sure that, you really get the most from each and every training session that you do. Even if you are based in Dubai as well, though, we don't just do in-person only. Because, like I said, the base of our plan is actually coaching. The online coaching component or the coaching accountability component is actually the base of everything that we do. And then, on top of that, depending on what people need, they can then bolt on sessions. And we have 4 options. We have essentially remote coaching. We have hybrid, which is essentially 12 sessions across a 12-week period to be used depending on preference of the client and the coach. We then have our more intensive in-person options, which are Pro and VIP. So the Pro is 2 times a week in person with the ongoing coaching and accountability and the weekly check-in videos, etc., etc. And then the VIP is our top one, which is that 3 times a week in-person hands-on coaching, along with all the nutrition and accountability and everything that happens on the back end with the coaching side of things. So if you are someone who's kind of been program hopping, you're spinning your wheels, you're super frustrated with your progress, and you just feel like, surely there must be a better way of doing it than just kind of coming in and just doing whatever I feel like and just not really doing much other than just feeling a bit sweaty and tired, but there is a caveat to this. We don't want people who are just going to come in and then just disappear after a few months. You need to be someone who is, really looking to invest in a coaching relationship. You're really looking to invest in upskilling yourself in the gym. You're looking to upgrade your knowledge. And you're looking for someone who's not just going to be a yes person. You ideally want someone who's going to challenge you, who's going to hold you accountable, who's going to challenge you on things like your limiting beliefs, who's going to challenge you to think bigger and to be able to achieve more than you originally thought in the gym. If that's something that sounds interesting to you, then we are the right team for you. So don't be scared to reach out. Now, where can you find us? If you go to our Instagram, our handle is @BetterBodyCollective. And if you just click or tap, if you're on your phone, which most people will be, on the link tree, you then just have to tap on the button that says work with us. You'll find a short application form, and then from there you fill that out and you'll be well on your way to organizing an initial either Zoom meeting or initial sit down in person if you're based in Dubai. And that's it for this week, guys. So thank you very much again. Like I said, the best way you can support this podcast is to go and give us a 5-star review. If you're listening to this on Apple Podcasts, if you're listening to it on any of your other preferred podcast platforms, take a screenshot of the episode, share it into the stories, tag some friends that you think would find the episode useful. And that is the best way that you can support us and help us get this information in front of more people. That's it for me this week, guys. Have a fantastic rest of the week, and I'll see you in the next episode.